Hey there, everybody. Mr. Taylor here again to teach you guys the last section of the epithelial tissues notes. And so today we're just going to kind of wrap things up with epithelium. We're going to learn about glandular epithelium, and that's going to be it. So, first thing we're going to do is our warm up. So, this is asking you to write an analogy. So I want you to think of something that is related to or similar to each of these things, but is not something biological. And when I say not biological, I mean not something we're doing in this class. So if you think that something is like a spider, you can use that. That's fine. But don't say simple squamous is like stratified squamous. Don't compare it to something else. So go through these and think of something common that you can think of that is a similar structure or function. All right, good luck. All right, so hopefully you did that. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of examples for you. And there's no real right or wrong answer as long as it makes sense for you. This is just to help you visualize. So the first one, simple squamous epithelium. It's very thin. So I was thinking maybe like tissue paper. You could say like a coffee filter might be a good answer. There's lots of good answers for this, but something that's thin, something that's used as a filter. You could use like a sieve, that you use to filter things, whatever. Any of those things is good. Cilia, of course, we know are those little hair-like processes. So I was thinking, when I think of cilia, I always think of crowd surfing because, whoops, I cannot write. Because, there's the cell and there's all these little cilia, and they're kind of like the people in the crowd that stick their hands up and move stuff on top. So you could use that. You could also use something like conveyor belt because a conveyor belt moves stuff. You can also think of a lot of people think of these as oars, especially on bacteria or protists and stuff like that, because they all kind of help the little cilia move around. So something like that. All right, microvilli, and of course we know these are little finger-like extensions. So you might have said fingers. Okay, that's great because that's kind of what they look like. They're just these folds of the membrane that stick up, but they're also used for absorption. So I was thinking maybe functionally it was like a sponge used to absorb something, anything like that. All right, basement membrane. If you remember, we said for our epithelial cells, they have this basement membrane that sticks down that anchors them into the underlying tissues. So of course you could have written basement, but I was thinking maybe roots, which I know is technically biological because of plants, but roots are good. Maybe an anchor would be good. Velcro. Look how creative we're getting. Look at this. Glue, anything like that. Something that would used to stick things down. All right, stratified squamous epithelium. All right, so we know it's used for protection and has many layers. So one thing you could think of is wax on your car. You know how you have your paint and then you put a coat of wax on top to protect it. So it's layered. You could think of that. You could think of maybe bricks because, it's many layers of flattened cells. Hey, how about it? You could think of a lot of different things. It's your creativity. So whatever you think that would be good for stratified squamous epithelium. All right, transitional epithelium is very stretchy. So I was thinking of maybe a balloon. You could think of a rubber band. All right, and those are functional comparisons. Structurally, because it's a transformer, you could write transformer, Optimus Prime, whatever, Bumblebee, whoever your favorite is. Great. Goblet cells. Goblet cells are, of course, those big fatty cells that are full of mucus, blah, blah, blah. So you could think of I don't know, you could think of them as, oh, here's a good one. How about a factory? Because they produce this mucus and it comes out. So you can think of it as a little factory functionally. Structurally, you could think of it as a wine glass or a goblet. You could also think of it, well, I don't know. Let's see. You could think of it as a slime. People make slime. They come as little you know those little jars of slime. I guess you can buy. It's a slime jar, whatever, anything along those lines that associates it with mucus. And then last one, pseudostratified epithelium. So if you remember, this was fake stratified, looked like it had many layers, but doesn't really. Ooh, that's a tricky one. I always think of this as the woods. And how when you go into the woods, here's the ground and you have little bushes. and then you have like a little tree, and then you have like a big tree, and then you have like another little tree next to that, and they're all rooted to the same ground. And then like maybe over here you have like a little bush. They're all rooted to the same ground, but they don't all make it up to the top. So some are like tall, some are medium, some are short. That's kind of how I think about pseudostratified. It's all like densely packed, and then you have like little plants like, you know, in between, you know. But whatever works for you, just to, you know, give you an idea, something to think about to relate this to. All right, moving right along. So glandular epithelium is our last stop that we have to cover. And so when we look at glandular epithelium, the function of glandular epithelium is to secrete. Secrete is a word that a lot of people don't like, but secrete basically just means to like produce a substance. So anything that your body produces is a secretion. So for example, you could have like sweat, oil, milk, saliva, hormones, mucus, all those kinds of things, all those like wonderful, beautiful things that come out of the human body, all produced by glands. Okay, so there's two different types. There's what are called endocrine glands, and the key thing to see here is prefix endo, meaning inside, right? So endo secretes into the interstitial fluid, which you can basically think as your blood. Sometimes it doesn't go directly into the blood. That's why I wrote interstitial fluid, and we'll talk more about this later. That's kind of like the clear fluid that kind of floats around your body. It's basically plasma. So endocrine goes into your blood. Exocrine, prefix exo meaning out, secretes into ducts that lead to a free surface. So basically these go outside your body. So think about it. If you look at this list of things I made here, would you want sweat to go into your blood or outside of your body? Oh, you want to go outside? It's exocrine. Do you want oil to go into your blood or outside of your body? Oh, exo. Milk, you would not want to have milk in your blood. You would not want to have saliva in your blood. All bad things. You would not want to have mucus in your blood. All these are examples of exocrine. The one thing that's an endocrine is hormones. So endocrine and hormones are synonymous. In other words, these things are all things that need to get out of your body. All your hormones need to stay in. Now, we say out of your body, like your stomach acid. Oh, there's another one, stomach acid. It's inside your body, but it's going to a free surface, right? It's going to like the hollow inside of your stomach into the lumen. Okay, so it is considered exocrine. All right, the structure. When we look at these glands, they can either be what are called alveolar or tubular. And so an alveolus simply means like a cup shape. And you may have heard of the alveolus before with the lungs. That's what like the inside of your lungs look like. They have these little cups. So it can either look like a little cup, or it can just look like a tube that just kind of like comes to an end. And you know what a tube is. It looks like a test tube. They can be simple or compound. These are both simple. They're just one thing. Compound would be like where we have a gland that comes down, and then you have like multiple alveoli. This would be a compound versus simple. Okay, so we have like big, complex, compound glands, and we have really simple glands. Okay, and then secretion. We have three different mechanisms for secretion. Okay, the first one, merocrine, not to be confused with merocrine, is also known as ecrine. You may see this written. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, this is just where like stuff comes out. So this is just like basic secretion. It just releases its product. So if you think about it, like here's a cell, here's its nucleus, it makes a product, the product comes out. Yay, that's merocrine. Really simple. Goblet cells are a great example of this. So, you know, if we kept drawing these goblet cells the other day, and I drew all these little vesicles that they're producing, and these vesicles are just released, and there's mucus, and then just kind of forms like a glob. All right, very basic. The cell does this its whole life. It's like a little factory. Apocrine is a little bit weird. Okay, apocrine, the apical or apical surface detaches. And that's where we get this from. Apocrine. apical, you get it. So basically this cell, same thing, happy little cell, grows a whole bunch of product, but then does this weird thing where like the top of the cell with all the product in it snaps off from the bottom. So basically grows like a little membrane in here. And then this little part disconnects and ruptures and all this stuff comes out. So it gets like all this little like little cell parts plus the secretion. Okay. And apocrine, actually, this is kind of interesting. You know how you have like your armpits have like sweat that smells bad and so you have to wear deodorant? Literally, armpit, AP, hey, there you go. Produces apocrine sweat. So that's a really good example of that. Another really great example of this is milk. So when you're drinking milk, you're drinking a whole bunch of little cow cells that like split in half and then ruptured, and then all this gobbledygook is what you are drinking. Enjoy. Merocrine, like I said, is like the most basic and it's the most common. So if we look at our list here, sweat is produced by merocrine. So it's just like, hey, sweaty water's coming out. Saliva is another one. Saliva is very watery. It just comes out. A lot of your hormones are produced this way. It's just, hey, the hormones come out of the cell, and it's the most common. And then the last one, holocrine. This one's kind of weird. This is where the cell dies. And we call that lysing. So it lyses to release its secretion. That's a secretion, just pretend. Okay, there we go. So basically, in holocrine, you have a cell, and it grows, and it gets bigger, and it's like, yay, but it fills up with all this, like, product. It's like, ooh, I'm getting full of all sorts of secretions, and also one day it's just like, boom, and all these little pieces, like, explode out, and all those little pieces of junk include all the little secretions that it made. So basically, I don't know why it only exploded in one direction, but you get the idea. So holocrine, these guys like self-destruct. And examples of holocrine secretions, the best one I can think of is called sebum, which is the oil in your skin. So like your skin oil is actually like little bits of like dead cells that just like blew themselves up. Yeah. So, yeah, good. All right, so let's take a look at some examples of this. So these are showing us all of our different like shapes for these different glands. So most of the time, especially when you have like an exocrine gland, you have what's called a duct, which is kind of like the tube leading down to the gland, and then you have the gland itself. And so like here's the surface cells, and you can see how it's epithelial. It's just all lined all the way down. Okay, so we have what are called simple alveolar, where it just kind of goes down, forms a little like pocket, and goes back up. You can have a compound, a branched one. And the branched one, it kind of has a few different like pieces, but it's all connected to like one tube. But then when you have a compound, you have a tube that comes down and breaks into other ducts. So they're all connected. And then now this one is also compound. So each one of these is like one of these guys. But you can also have a simple where you just have these little guys branching off. The tubular ones, like I said, this look like a tube. They don't really expand out, but they can curl, and sometimes they can branch too. So we didn't talk about the branching, so don't worry about that too much. But then if you make them compound, all of a sudden it gets real crazy. And then you can even get ones that have different parts. This is way more information than we need to get into. And then these are the different types of secretion. So here's your merocrine, and it's just like the Golgi apparatus is busy producing the secretion, and it just releases out. So this is just a regular secretion. So you just get the product, and the cell just keeps doing this its whole life. In apocrine, you can see how like all the secretions build up, but then all of a sudden it starts to pinch off and it separates. And this is the actual secretion, including the part of the cell, and then this just grows back. So it goes back to step one. And then holocrine, this one, the cell just builds up and builds up and builds up, and it just dies and lyses and releases all this, all these different parts, and that's what becomes a secretion. So let's look at a couple examples of this. Here is a thyroid gland, and you can see in the thyroid gland, you can see there's just like a simple cuboidal layer around a lumen, and these are just making a merocrine secretion into that what is called a thyroid follicle, and that stuff that's in there is the precursor of the hormone that eventually is going to get released. Here is an exocrine gland. This is I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that's endocrine, so that's hormones, of course. This is an exocrine gland, and this is the inside of a sweat gland down the side of your skin. And what you can see is that the sweat gland, it has like a very long duct, and then it has like a very coiled portion down here with the glandular part. And so we have like a stratified cuboidal. So we have multiple layers of cube-shaped cells. And these guys, because they're merocrine also, just produce their secretions. It goes into this lumen, and then it goes all the way back up through the duct and is released out to the surface. This is a picture of a sebaceous gland under the skin that produces oil. And this sebaceous gland, the oil actually lubricates your hair and keeps it from getting stuck when it comes out of your hair and coming out of your skin and becoming inflamed. And you can actually see, here's all the cells down here. And so notice some of these have nuclei and some don't. The ones in the center that don't are cells that are getting ready to die. And when they die, they lyse. And all that like cell product becomes the oil that comes out and lubricates your hair. All right, so here's the things to know. So that was all the new information, but these are the things to know and remember for when we take our quiz. When we look at epithelium, the characteristics all epithelium have in common are it always is in sheets. So it's always like layered down on a surface. It has 3 different surfaces, the apical, lateral, and basal surfaces. It's always avascular, meaning that it has no blood vessels. It's always innervated, which means it's connected to nerve cells. So it's used for sensation and feeling. It's rapid regeneration, so it grows back very quickly, but unfortunately can also form cancers. And it has a basement membrane that anchors it down. So those are the 6 characteristics that are always true for all epithelia. There's 3 types of cells: squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. And so you should know what those shapes look like. So squamous is flat, cuboidal is kind of cube-shaped, and columnar is kind of column-shaped or tall. They can be simple or stratified. So it can either have 1 layer or more than 1 layer. And we name them by the cell shape and the type of layering. And finally, the functions, it's used for protection, particularly stratified squamous, secretion, a lot of different epithelial cells secrete, absorption, excretion. So excretion is like getting rid of waste products. So like, for example, like in the kidneys, you excrete urine out of the kidneys. Filtration and diffusion. And then all of your covering linings and glands fit under epithelium. So anything in your body that's like surface, that's covering, lining, if it's like a hollow organ or a gland, is going to be epithelium. And so this is showing you the summary of all the different tissues we talked about. And so you can read this, but it says about where the locations are of these things, and they're found pretty much where you'd expect. Your skin for stratified squamous, simple squamous is found lining your blood vessels. It's found covering a lot of your organs. Simple cuboidal is found in a lot of glands, and it tells you what their functions are. So if you want to go through and look at this, you can, but it's pretty much just a recap of what we already talked about. And that's it. So if you have any questions, hit me up, and happy studying, and good luck.